The sunlight. The goddamn sunlight. That's what I remember most about those first few months. In the house Alex and I shared, the windows were always shuttered, the air always thick with things unsaid. But here, with Mark, light poured in through giant panes of glass, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, happy sprites. It felt clean. It felt safe. We were in the dining room, a space so bright it almost hurt my eyes. The table was a heavy oak, a gift from Mark's parents, and the wine was a deep, rich red. Mark was telling a story about a disastrous client meeting, his hands punctuating the air, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was handsome, but it wasn't the sharp, cutting handsomeness of Alex. Mark's face was open, kind. You could look at him and feel your shoulders relax. So the guy stands up, adjusts his toupee, which is slipping, by the way, and says with a straight face, "I think we have a real synergy here." "I almost choked on my water," Mark finished, and then he laughed. It was a good laugh, a deep, genuine sound that came from his chest and filled the room. For a full second, it was the sound of my new life. And then, it wasn't. For less than a heartbeat, the sound twisted. The warmth curdled, thinning into a high-pitched, mocking sneer. A sound I knew better than my own name. It was Alex's laugh, the one he used right before he'd say something to cut me down to nothing. The sound of a razor blade. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The metal felt ice cold against my fingers. The piece of roasted potato on it suddenly looked gray and unappetizing. "You okay?" Mark's voice was warm again, his brow furrowed with concern. The ghost of Alex's laugh was gone, so completely that I wondered if I'd imagined it. I forced a smile, placing the fork down. My hand was shaking. Just a little. "Yeah, fine," I said, my voice a little too bright. "Nothing, just thought I heard something. Must be tired." "It's just your imagination," I told myself, picking up my wine glass. "Get a grip, Sarah. He's gone. Alex isn't here anymore." I took a long sip, but the wine tasted like ash. A few days passed. The memory of the laugh faded, and I pushed it down, burying it under the happy routine of our life. Mark would go to the office, I'd work from my home study, and in the evenings we'd cook together or just collapse on the couch. It was normal. It was what I had craved for years. I was deep in a project proposal, the clacking of my keyboard the only sound in the house, when I heard Mark's voice from his office down the hall. He was on a conference call. I usually tuned it out, but one sentence sliced through my concentration like a gunshot. A chill, sudden and sharp, traced its way up my spine. My fingers froze over the keys. That phrase, the venom in it. It wasn't just the words, it was the cadence, the absolute, cold-blooded finality. It was Alex's business mantra. I'd heard him say it 100 times, his voice flat and merciless, before he'd go on to destroy some smaller company just for sport. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. My heart was doing a weird fluttery thing in my chest. I walked to his office door, which was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. Mark was at his desk, but he wasn't on the phone anymore. He was just looking at his screen, a gentle smile on his face as he typed. He must have sensed me there because he turned. His smile widened when he saw me. "Hey, you, I'm all done." His voice was soft, the complete opposite of the brutal tone I'd just heard. There was no trace of cruelty in his eyes, only the familiar, loving look he always gave me. Did I hear that right? The thought hammered in my head. It must be a coincidence, just a common business phrase, right?
Mark wasn't that kind of person. He was competitive, yes, but he wasn't a killer, not like Alex. But the seed of doubt, planted by that laugh a few days ago, had started to sprout. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stew. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the knife on the cutting board a comforting sound. I heard footsteps upstairs, Mark moving around in our bedroom. He'd come home early, complaining of a headache. My phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up. The screen read, Mark. I frowned.
Why was he calling me from upstairs? I swiped to answer. You need something, honey? I asked, leaning against the counter. Hey, babe. It was Mark's voice, but it was tinny, surrounded by the distinct sounds of traffic, a car horn blaring, the low hum of engines. Just wanted to let you know I'm on my way home. Traffic on the 405 is a nightmare. I'll probably be another 20 minutes. My entire body went rigid. The knife lay on the cutting board next to a half-chopped carrot. The footsteps upstairs had stopped. I lowered my voice to a whisper, my throat suddenly tight. Mark, where are you? On the freeway, he said, a note of confusion in his voice. Like I said. Why? Is everything okay? At that exact moment, a voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. It wasn't loud, but it was as clear as a bell in the silent house. A voice that wasn't coming through the phone. Sarah? Who are you talking to down there? It was Alex's voice, unmistakable, cold and sharp and possessive. And it was coming from the body of the man I'd heard walking around upstairs. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the tiled floor. My legs gave out, and I slid down the kitchen cabinets to sit in a heap, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Footsteps descended the stairs, heavy, deliberate. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't happening. Honey, what's wrong? I opened my eyes. Mark, the man who looked like Mark, who was supposed to be Mark, was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face a mask of worry. His voice was his own again, gentle and concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. What happened? He saw the phone on the floor and walked over, scooping it up. The line was still connected. He put it to his ear. Hello? He paused, then looked at the screen. That's weird. It says it was a call from my number, but there's no signal now. As I watched, his thumb swiped across the screen. He ended the call. He erased the only proof that my world had just been torn in two. He knelt in front of me, his hands on my shoulders. Sarah, you're trembling. Talk to me. But I couldn't. My mind was screaming. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a memory. It was in him. The thing I ran from, the monster I divorced, it was inside the man I loved. And it was playing with me. It could turn Alex on and off like a switch. Later that night, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. Mark was beside me, his breathing deep and even. His arm was draped protectively over my waist. His presence, which just that morning had been my greatest comfort, now felt like a cage. Every quiet breath he took sounded like a countdown. I watched him in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. Maybe it was a hallucination. A desperate part of my brain pleaded. Stress, trauma. Then his fingers began to move. His hand, resting on the nightstand beside the bed, started to tap. It was a light, barely audible sound against the wood. A restless, impatient rhythm. Tap, tap. A pause. Tap, tap, tap. My blood turned to ice. It was a small thing, a meaningless habit, but it wasn't his. It was Alex's. It was the exact rhythm Alex would tap out on his desk, on the steering wheel, on my arm, whenever he was getting angry, his patience wearing thin. An unconscious tell, a little storm warning before the hurricane. The thing inside him was still there, even while he slept.
And it was getting impatient. The tapping from the night before echoed in my head all morning, a phantom rhythm against the silence. I tried to bury it in routine: shower, get dressed, make coffee. The small, normal acts that were supposed to be the armor of my new life. I was at my laptop in the kitchen nook when Mark came down, already dressed for work. He was humming, a tune I didn't recognize, and placed a mug of coffee beside me. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the warm ceramic, but then I stopped. The mug was on the left side of my laptop. A small thing, a stupid thing, but Mark always put my coffee on the right, always. He knew I was right-handed, knew I liked it there, within easy reach. Putting it on the left? That was Alex. It was one of his tiny power plays, a way to disrupt my space, to make me adjust to him, even in the smallest way. My heart did a little trip hammer beat against my ribs. I stared at the mug. He's just tired, I told myself. He wasn't paying attention.
It doesn't mean anything. Without a word, I picked up the mug and moved it to the right side of my keyboard. Mark didn't seem to notice. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head, his lips warm. "Have a good day," he said, his voice his own. "I'll see you tonight." The moment the front door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking again. God, I hated this. I opened my laptop, but I didn't go to my work files. I went to Google. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Alex Croft ex-girlfriends. I spent the next 2 hours falling down a rabbit hole of old social media profiles and forgotten blog posts. Most of them were dead ends. But then I found her, Emily Carter, a smiling blonde in a picture from 6 years ago, arm in arm with a younger but no less predatory-looking Alex. I scrolled through her old posts, happy at first. Trips, fancy dinners. Then the posts became less frequent, more vague. Pictures of sunsets with captions like "getting through it" or "finding my peace." Then nothing. Her profile went dark about a year after she started dating him. I was leaning in, studying a photo of her where she looked thin, her smile strained, when I heard the floorboards creak behind me. I jumped, nearly knocking over the coffee. Mark was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, holding his briefcase. "Forgot my wallet," he said, giving me a soft smile. He walked past me to the counter, picked it up, and then paused, his eyes landing on my screen. He glanced at the photo of Emily. A casual, offhand comment left his lips. She always looked tired, probably not sleeping well. His voice was light, but the words hit me like a physical blow. They were exact, word for goddamn word. I remembered the day. Alex and I had first gotten together. I asked about Emily. He waved a dismissive hand and said she was a mess, always looked tired, probably not sleeping well. I slammed the laptop shut. The plastic clacked loudly in the quiet room. "Whoa," Mark said, taking a step back. "You okay? I didn't mean to startle you." "You did," I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. He looked from my face to the closed laptop. "Sorry, was just grabbing my wallet. What were you looking at?" "The news," I lied, the word tasting like poison. "Just some stupid article." He frowned, a flicker of something, not suspicion, more like confusion, in his eyes. But he let it go. "Okay, well, I'm really leaving now." He leaned in for a kiss, but I turned my head slightly so it landed on my cheek. He hesitated for a second, then straightened up and left. I sat there for a long time, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. It wasn't just mimicking him anymore. It wasn't just a voice or a habit. It was accessing his memories. It was thinking his thoughts. What the hell is this thing? My investigation became an obsession. Later that week, I found another name, Jessica Thorne.
This one was harder to find. There was no social media, just a single grim article from a local newspaper 4 years ago. Local woman dies in apparent suicide. The article was short on details, but it mentioned she had been in a long-term relationship that had recently ended. It didn't name Alex, but I knew. I felt it in my bones. I was reading the article for the 10th time, trying to dissect every word, when a hand landed on my shoulder. I screamed, throwing myself forward, my chair rolling back and hitting the wall. Mark stood there, his face pale. He was supposed to be at the gym. He held up his hands. "Sarah, hey, it's just me. I came home early." I was breathing hard, my heart feeling like it was trying to escape my chest. He took a step closer, his eyes falling on the headline on my monitor. I didn't have time to close it. He read it, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, and his voice was low, devoid of all its usual warmth. It was flat, cold. "You shouldn't dig into things that don't concern you," he said. "Some people are just too weak to handle reality." It was Alex's voice, not the sound of it, but the soul of it, the casual cruelty, the utter contempt for anyone he deemed lesser. I scrambled to my feet, knocking the chair over. I stared at him, at the man I loved, whose face was now a mask of cold judgment. "What did you just say?" I whispered. He blinked, and just like that, the hardness in his eyes vanished, replaced by genuine confusion.
He looked at me, then at the fallen chair, as if waking from a dream. "What? I don't know. What did I say? That just came out. Sarah, what is this? What are you reading?" He looked truly lost, his brow furrowed in worry. But I couldn't see him anymore. I could only see the monster peeking through the cracks. It wasn't just copying habits now. It was implanting an entire personality, an ideology. It was overwriting Mark, piece by piece, and he didn't even know it was happening. My fight wasn't with him. It was with the parasite eating him from the inside out, and I was the one who had led it to his door. I was the carrier. The realization made me sick to my stomach. I had to know more. I had to find proof, something tangible, something that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. The newspaper article about Jessica mentioned she was survived by a sister. It took me another day of frantic searching, but I found her. A woman named Clara living in a small town 2 hours away. I drove there the next day, telling Mark I was visiting an old college friend. Clara was hesitant at first, her eyes wary when I told her I used to date Alex Croft. But when she saw the look on my face, something in her softened. "He did something to her," she said, her voice barely a whisper as we sat in her cramped living room. "The doctors said she was depressed, that she had a breakdown. But it was more than that. It was like he erased her. In the end, she kept saying the weirdest thing. Over and over. She said, 'He's stealing my memories.'" My blood ran cold. "What else did she say?" I asked, my own voice trembling. Clara got up and went to a small wooden chest in the corner. She came back with a little leather-bound book, a diary. "I think you should have this," she said, pressing it into my hands. I thought she was going crazy. Maybe she wasn't. I thanked her, my throat tight, and practically ran back to my car. I drove to a nearby park and sat there, the engine off, the little book heavy in my lap. My hands shook so badly it took me 3 tries to open it to the first page. Jessica's handwriting was neat, loopy, and the first sentence made the world tilt on its axis. Day 1. He started doing the strangest things today. He whistled a song I've never heard him whistle before. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching in my throat. It was all there, a detailed account of my own nightmare, written in a dead woman's hand. The way he started using phrases she'd never heard. The way he'd suddenly know things about her past she'd never told him. The tapping. God, the finger tapping. It was all there. I felt a wave of crushing, absolute despair. This wasn't random. This was a pattern, a cycle, a hunt. With a sense of dread, I turned to the very last entry. The handwriting was a jagged, barely legible scrawl. It was dated the day before she died. It's not him anymore. It wears his face, but it's not him. It told me things. It said it doesn't just want him. It wants everything he has. His company, his money, me. It laughed using his mouth, and it told me his biggest rival was next on the list. It's so hungry. It kept saying the name. My eyes scanned the last line, the name scrawled in a final, desperate burst of ink. Mark. A sound from behind me made me jump. A sharp click. The sound of a key turning in the ignition of the car parked right behind mine. I looked in the rearview mirror. Mark was sitting in his car, watching me. He must have followed me. He smiled, a slow, easy smile that didn't reach his eyes, and gave a little wave. Then he started his engine. The friendly sound of it was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. The drive home was a 2-hour silent film. I clutched Jessica's diary in my lap, the worn leather a dead weight, a testament to a horror I was only now beginning to understand. Mark drove. He hummed that same tune from the other morning, a cheerful, tuneless sound that scraped against my raw nerves. Every so often, he'd glance at me, a question in his eyes, but he didn't ask. He just kept driving, his hand steady on the wheel, a perfect portrait of the man I loved. A perfect mask. Back inside the house, the air felt thin, hard to breathe. I put the diary in my purse, zipping it shut, as if I could contain the poison inside. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with that gentle concern that had been my anchor for the past year. I couldn't look at him. Fine. Just a long day.
I went to the kitchen, needing to do something with my hands. I poured myself a glass of water, my fingers trembling so badly that ice cubes clattered against the side. I stood there, leaning against the counter, just breathing. In, out. He came up behind me. I didn't flinch. I was expecting it. He put his hands on my shoulders. "You remember that trip to Vermont?" he said, his voice a low murmur near my ear. "The one where the car broke down in the middle of that snowstorm. I was thinking about that today." The glass slipped from my hand. It didn't shatter, just hit the rug with a dull thud, water splashing over my feet. I didn't feel the cold. I couldn't feel anything except the blood draining from my face. Vermont. The broken-down rental. The tiny, overpriced motel with the leaky faucet. That was a memory carved into my soul, a miserable, terrifying night that had ended in one of the worst fights of my life. A memory I shared with Alex. Only Alex. I turned around slowly. My voice was a whisper, brittle and thin. "What are you talking about? We've never been to Vermont together." He frowned, a perfect imitation of confusion. It was so good, so convincing, it almost made me doubt my own sanity. "We haven't? That's weird. I can see it so clearly.
The snow? The tow truck driver with the missing tooth? He shook his head, a small, self-deprecating laugh. Guess I'm losing it. No, a voice screamed inside my head. You're not losing it. You're losing you. It started, the last stage. It's not just mimicking him, it's stealing from me now. Later, I was trying to eat dinner. I pushed a piece of chicken around my plate, the taste of ash in my mouth. I was too quiet. I knew I was too quiet. The silence was a thing between us, a third person at the table. "You're being weird tonight," he said, putting his fork down. "I'm tired," I said. His eyes narrowed, just a fraction, but it was enough. "Tired, right. Just like you were tired that time you lost my mother's ring. So fucking irresponsible." The accusation was so sudden, so vicious, it was like a slap. My head snapped up. The words, the rage, the specific, impossible detail. It was all Alex. Mark had never met Alex's mother. He'd never even seen a picture of her. The ring had been a family heirloom Alex accused me of losing, a weapon he'd used against me for months. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something inside me went cold and still. The fear was still there, a humming wire deep in my gut, but on the surface there was only a terrible clarity. I looked straight into his eyes. "That's not you speaking," I said. My voice was flat, dead. He froze. The anger on his face flickered like a bad TV signal. And then it settled. It smoothed out into something else, something horribly familiar. A slow, lazy smirk spread across his lips, twisting Mark's handsome features into a grotesque parody. It was Alex's smirk, the one he used when he knew he had won. He leaned back in his chair, picking up his wine glass. He swirled the red liquid, watching it cling to the sides, exactly the way Alex always did. He wasn't hiding anymore. "Clever girl, Sarah," he said. His voice was Mark's, but the rhythm, the condescending drawl, was pure Alex. Mark was gone, utterly gone. This thing, this parasite, was sitting in his chair, wearing his clothes, looking at me with his eyes. A puppet. "Where is Alex?" I asked. The question felt stupid, pointless, but I had to ask. It laughed. A real laugh this time, and the sound was a monstrous blend of Mark's warm tenor and Alex's cruel rasp. Oh, Alex. Alex was the prototype. A useful vessel, but so limited, full of tedious little angers. He served his purpose. He got me to you. And you, my dear, got me to him. He gestured around the beautiful, expensive room with his wineglass. The upgrade was long overdue. Alex always wanted his company, you know, his money, his life. And now I have it all. I have everything. He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving my face. And I have you, of course. You're the key, Sarah, the perfect bridge. A cold understanding began to dawn, a truth so awful it felt like swallowing glass. What do you mean? It feeds on connection, it said. Its tone conversational, like a scientist explaining an experiment. The deeper the bond, the stronger the bridge.
Your pathetic divorce from Alex wasn't an escape. It was a transfer. And your love for Mark, oh, your desperate, healing love. You practically held the door open for me. The more you loved him, the more you let your guard down, the easier it was to overwrite the source code. You didn't save him, Sarah. You fed him to me.
The floor dropped out from under me. Every happy memory with Mark, every kiss, every whispered "I love you," it was all just fuel. My love hadn't been a shield, it had been the goddamn weapon. I was the carrier. I was the disease. The realization didn't just break my heart, it annihilated it. There was nothing left but black, sucking emptiness. There was no way to fight it. Staying meant watching this thing live in his skin forever. Leaving meant abandoning the last shred of the man I loved to this monster. And running to someone new, I would just be carrying the plague to another doorstep. I said nothing. I just sat there, staring at the creature wearing my lover's face. Eventually, it stood up. Well, this has been fun. I'm going to go over some of Mark's financials. So much to learn. It walked out of the room, whistling that same damn tune. I waited for hours. I sat at the table until the house was dark and silent. I heard it go upstairs, heard the shower run, heard the bedroom door close. My body finally moved, a machine running on its last reserves of adrenaline. I had to leave. It wasn't a choice for survival anymore. It was the only option that wasn't pure evil. I couldn't save Mark, but I could stop the spread. I could become an island. My hands were surprisingly steady as I packed a small bag. A few clothes, all the cash I had, the car keys, and Jessica's diary. I crept down the stairs, each step a gamble against a creaking floorboard. I made it to the front door, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My hand was on the doorknob, turning it with excruciating slowness. I pulled the door open, and he was standing there, on the porch, bathed in the pale glow of the motion sensor light, waiting. He was smiling that same empty smile. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice soft. "But we were just getting started." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't his presence that terrified me. It was what he was holding. In his hand, held casually between his thumb and forefinger, was Jessica's small, leather-bound diary. He must have taken it from my purse. He opened it, flipping past the frantic final entries to a clean, blank page at the back. He held it out to me, along with a pen. "I think you should start writing," it said, its voice a perfect, loving echo of Mark's.